Good morning. Welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors for a regular meeting today of September 9th, 2014. We started our meeting this morning at 8:30 a.m., went into closed session. County Council, Public Employee Appointment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, the title of Public Works Director. The board direction this morning is that we're pleased to announce the appointment of Robert Packinger as interim Public Works Director. So Robert is here, and congratulations, and we look forward to working with you. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you very much. I intend to serve and do the best that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
I don't know what you get into, Robert.
Okay, there's a few items on the agenda this morning that I'd like to just clarify. Today we have a luncheon that we will be attending for the Commission on Aging Senior of the Year luncheon, which starts about the noon hour. We are going to be able to work through our consent agenda. We'll move on to our regular agenda and take a break, probably about 11:45, so we can attend the luncheon that's here in town. And then following the luncheon, we will address the rest of the agenda. My goal is to address number 16 and 17 after lunch and before the budget hearings. We've been notified there's a number of folks from the special districts who'd like to be able to attend, and so I'm trying to give a guideline as to when that item may fall on the agenda. We wish to do this after lunch and before the board budget hearings. So with that, I ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This morning on the agenda, we have some recognition and acknowledgments. From the administration, we have 3 proclamations recognizing the Commissions on Aging 2014 Seniors of the Year. And Lori, would you give a history of this or overview, please?
Actually, I'm going to look to Ms. Severu to do so. Thanks.
Annually, the Commission on Aging selects a number of volunteers who they feel have done some great service to the county and to their community, and they are announced and honored at a luncheon, which you will be attending at noon today.
Thank you. And I guess so this is kept in top secrecy.
Top secret.
Yeah. Okay. I have a motion made by Supervisor Callaway, second by Supervisor Edson, to adopt 3 proclamations recognizing the Commission on Aging's 2014 Seniors of the Year, which will be announced later today at a luncheon being sponsored by the Commission on Aging. All those in favor? Excuse me, public comments. Any public comments on this item?
Good morning, Kathy Topol, and I am the chair for the Commission on Aging this year. I'd like to thank you for this, also thank you for your participation in this event. As you know, volunteers make up much of our workforce in this community, so I'd just like to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Number 3, from the library, proclaiming September as Adult Literacy Awareness Month. And board action on this item. Is there anyone from the library who wishes to speak on this item?
Yes, I'm Pat Ross, and I'm the coordinator of the Adult Literacy Program. I'd like to say that all throughout the state of California, awareness is being created this month through proclamations such as these, and events are being held by libraries. What we're attempting to do is make people realize what a critically important situation we have with adult literacy in the state. Here in Calaveras County, 22% of adults can't read above a 4th grade level, meaning they are unable to help their children with homework or reading, can't read medicine bottles, and can't participate in productive employment. So we are very appreciative of your proclamation today. I've also issued to the members of the board and our administration an invitation to join us for a celebratory luncheon this coming Friday at noon, in which we're going to honor our tutors and our students. It's a joint effort with Amador County participating with Calaveras County, and we want to see every one of you there. Hoping to get some feedback from you on your attendance, and I appreciate your help and support with this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat, 22% in this county?
22%.
How do you find that number?
That's done by a survey from CLLS, California State Library Nurses.
Pat, can you speak into the microphone so all can hear better?
Between 20 and 22% of adults in Calaveras County, according to a survey from the California State Library Literacy Services, cannot read or write above a 4th grade level. That figure is much higher, of course, in urban areas where ESL is higher. However, I can get you those figures. It's been growing in the last 5 years.
In our county?
In our county. It was 17% about 4 years ago when I started. And I would like to say that, we're turning the tide, but at the moment, my 104 students and 48 tutors are somewhat immersed in attempting to remedy the situation, and I have a waiting list. So,
where is the luncheon?
the luncheon is at Testa Bella on St. Charles Street. We've had a number of Friends of the Library events there. I believe you'll all know where it is. If not, contact me. And as I say, it's going to honor our tutors and our students, and it won't be a long, drawn-out affair, so your time will not be, completely eaten up by long presentations or anything like that. But it's a joint effort with Amador County and my counterpart over there, and I have planned it for a long period of time. And it was a way for us to maximize exposure and our limited budgets. So, you're all cordially invited. Please come.
Thank you. I am going to take this moment to read the proclamation. Whereas recognizing that a child's first teacher is the parent, adults need strong literacy skills to raise children with proficient literacy skills. And whereas the need for a highly literate citizenry increases as California moves toward an increasingly technological future. And whereas more than 26% of the state's adults experience literacy issues that severely impact their lives and families, their ability to work productively, and their full participation as parents. And whereas, according to the American Medical Association, literacy skill levels are a stronger predictor of a person's health than age, income, employment status, education level, and race. And low literacy adds an estimated $230 billion to the country's annual health care costs. And whereas literacy is a civic right and citizens governed by written law ought to be able to read written law, and how low literacy skills create a barrier to full civic engagement. And whereas the Calaveras County Library, through the Adult Literacy Program, offers opportunities for adults to improve their literacy and language skills, and allows opportunities for community members to volunteer their amazingly powerful ability to help adults improve. Whereas the Calaveras Adult Tutoring Program is a member of the California Library Literacy Services Program, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary. Now therefore it be resolved that the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors is honored to proclaim September as Adult Literacy Awareness Month in Calaveras County. We commend the efforts of our volunteer tutors, adult learners, and literacy proponents, and we urge all citizens to strive to advance literacy in their homes and to strongly support ongoing literacy efforts in the community.
So moved.
I have a motion made by Supervisor Callaway and second by Supervisor Edson to proclaim September as Adult Literacy Awareness Month. Are there any comments, public comments on this item? I see Mr. Fry.
George Fry. Many years ago, I was a tutor, and I had a young man who had gone through school and got a high school diploma, and he was in his late 20s, and he signed up for the literacy program. He could not even read the road signs. At the end of a year, he wanted to get his driver's license, and he was so intense about doing that. At the end of the year, he was able to do that, and it was just an amazing experience from somebody who could not read stop sign. So it's a really great program.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Pat, for your work, and we have Mr. Edson here for the proclamation.
Okay. So you get thank you very much for your hard work, very important work. Appreciate it. There's your proclamation.
Thank you very much. It means a great deal to us. And
Thank you.
I just mentioned that if the gentleman would like to sign up again, I could use it. And if you have 2 hours a week, I know you have very busy schedules, but almost appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll want a picture. I'm sure you'll want a picture. Okay. I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've just been notified that the internet service in and around the boardroom is not working properly, so we are aware of it, and we are working on correcting that. At this time, we move to public comments. This item is for any items of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agenda. These may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking any action on this matter which is not posted on the agenda, unless it's determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. We're going to allocate a 30-minute time period for this item. If we should exceed the 30 minutes, then we'll continue this item at the end of our agenda. And at this time, I'm going to allow 3 minutes per speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mark Zahn. I'm with Gamma Disposal. And I'm just here to pass on some kudos to Motherlode Job Training. We used them this year. Hired 3 employees through them, and it was the easiest process I've done in 30 years. Tricia Frazier was there to help, and it was just a great process. I encourage any business owner or employer to use it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments?
Rebecca Callan, Auditor Controller. I just had a couple minutes that I wanted to go over an article that Mr. Nichols with the Calaveras Enterprise wrote last Tuesday. It was an opinion article regarding our compensation for our county employees. So the information that he used was a combination of the state controller's reports that we have given as well as Transparent California. Both websites received information from the County Auditor Controller's Office. However, both entities required different information based on different methodologies. For instance, gross pay versus net pay, regular compensation versus total compensation. And then in addition to that, I don't think any county or city or anyone ever set up their payroll system to have this level of granularity. This was a new thing for the public and the state, and to get public records requests to the scope that we started getting in 2009 and 2010. So it's been a definite learning process and retooling process for our payroll system. With that said, payroll data is inherently difficult to do comparisons with. You have each individual being compensated slightly different than the next one. You can have two people sitting right next to each other that are really in the same position but are compensated entirely differently. And that is just because there is incentivized pay that we have here at this county that pays someone for being here longer, having more education, et cetera. And in addition, even if you wanted to just compare base pay to base pay, those same two employees, one employee could be on a leave, could be using voluntary time off, and the other employee isn't. And so that's going to impact their gross pay as well. So with all of that, it can give this illusion of grossly excessive compensation differences depending on where you're looking. With that, Mr. Nichols captured higher variances than what actually occurred. However, there were increases. I think, when I talked to Mr. Nichols, I think the point of his article was a frustration with the fact that in one hand, this county has experienced higher than the statewide normal in assessed value reductions, and therefore that correlated with an absolute impact to our local revenue. And we reduced services, but at the same time, we were increasing compensation to employees. So it just didn't tie, and so I think that was his frustration. His article mainly dealt with those top paid positions, so I went ahead and did a comparison to better outline this for you as the board and for the public. And then if there's any other questions, as the public, the board, or Mr. Nichols, feel free to contact my office. We're always open to relay the best information that we can. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how do you do, because this is going to continue, I mean, not just for this county, but all counties, but for our county in particular, is there a recommendation for how we should manage it, since we do two different reportings to the state?
Well, the good news is that as the years have gone on, I think when the state first did this was all on the heels of Bell. Okay, so this was all Bell and Bell-like situations that had occurred. So the state didn't really know what to ask for, so they just asked for something. Something was better than nothing. But at the same time, Transparent California and Bay Area News Group were looking at it from a more granulated perspective. The state has finally caught up to what Transparent California and Bay Area News Group are asking for. So I think, with the 2013 year and going forward, those two should really be almost identical. Outside of a few variances, the state controller does not request names. Transparent California and Bay Area News Group do actually want the employee's name associated with the compensation. So outside of that, the data should be almost identical.
And I'm sure this is like one of 100 different kinds of reports that you probably submit with different criteria, and so no two reports are truly alike in any way.
And there's always going to be variances. In looking at the data, I actually did see there was There was an employee who, there was, if you recall, for any board members that were here back then, there was actually a negative cost of living adjustment that was done for the 2010-2011 fiscal year. So if you took an employee from that era, and that employee also was on a leave, and that employee also did voluntary time off, and then compared that same employee, 4 years later, that cost of living adjustment was reinstated. There's been 3 other cost of living adjustments. They had 2 or 3 merits from that initial date. They were no longer participating in voluntary time off, and they had no leave. So it looked like they had this astronomical increase in pay, and the reality is, yes, there were 3 COLAs. There was the reinstatement of the 1 COLA, but that voluntary time off and that leave all together really pushed it over to look a lot worse than it really was. But the reality is Mr. Nichols' opinion piece really was, how can we say that we are having to cut services, and at the same time we're continuing with incentivized payment programs for employees and still negotiating COLAs. That was his issue in the opinion piece, regardless of whether it was a 20% increase or a 30% increase or a 5% increase. It wasn't 0, and that was the issue.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comments?
Good morning. My name is Adam Pugh, and I'm with Congressman McClintock. I'm his Constituent Services Officer. Just to give you guys an idea of what we are currently working on in the district office and our DC office, one of the major issues is the drought. And earlier this year we passed and co-sponsored a water bill that is currently in joint committee with the Senate, trying to resolve and pass and put one bill up on the President's desk. So our DC office and our legislative team is working really hard with the bipartisan in the House and putting a bill forward that we believe will help benefit the local communities and Northern California as well. The bill primarily has pushed for less pulse releases out of the reservoirs in the north by the Bureau of Reclamation to help keep some of the water in Northern California rather than being flushed out to the ocean, to help the fish get out there. This bill also helps advocate for ESA reform and kind of limits that as well. We've been advocating and working on increasing water storage in Northern California. Our main issue right now is trying to increase the height of the Sugar Pine Reservoir in Forest Hill for additional storage. The next major issue that our office kind of recognizes in our district is the wildfire. Congressman McClintock recognizes that the lack of forest management and fuels reduction is kind of the one major factors and in the size of these fires. He is currently advocating for better forest management and public lands. We are seeing a better private land issue with forest or deforestation. However, we need to convince the Bureau of Reclamation and U.S. Forest Services to do that as well.
So does that mean the congressman's going to give the Forest Service more money?
With that, it would strictly be used for deforestation. It's not strictly for them to do what they want. However, it is strictly for the deforestation of the current forests. The next huge thing would be the rimfire salvage bill, which expedites the process after a fire so that timber harvests monies can be used to replant and clean up the areas that have previously been burned. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments?
Joe Kelly,
FEMA 2014. Nassau Creek, my property. Here's that little thing that's causing all this problem that you folks won't take care of. I have in my hand a copy of a letter received by Congressman McClintock's office from FEMA, and it was through an affirmation of Congressman McClintock's advising me at a public hearing where Ms. Callaway was there, when I asked, when FEMA information comes down the county, is it public information? He said yes. At that point, he was able to get me FEMA's map. In this letter from FEMA to Congressman McClintock, it says, in response to your request, FEMA performed a new analysis of the flood hazards in the vicinity of Mr. Kelly's property by modifying the model used to create the aforementioned flood mapping products. This analysis determined that the Nassau Creek Dam downstream of Mr. Kelly's property may affect the 1% annual chance water surface elevations for Mr. Kelly's property and could directly result in flood water backing into this area. In another missive, we have also completed an analysis of the flooding on Mr. Kelly's property. Our analysis indicates that water surface elevation will be raised on Mr. Kelly's parcel as a result of the dam during a 1% annual chance flood event. I have attached a spreadsheet that shows lowered water surface elevations in a hypothetical scenario in which the dam is removed, thus demonstrating that the dam is adversely impacting his property. We believe that this represents a potential violation that the county will need to address soon, I hope. That's from FEMA. So apparently the federal government's coming down saying it's your responsibility under the firms, federal insurance rate maps, which you have adopted in this county. Also in county government, state law gives government codes that say with the triggering of the housing ordinance of 2009, ours was done in 2010, 2009 was the start date. That triggers through two laws, different events. Every year you're supposed to be doing a review of the flooding issues in this county. You're not doing them. So I would suggest you start doing these things, do your job entirely. This is my property here. You can see a little red line going through there. That's the center line of creek. That means on either side it will be equal. That's not equal. That's a 400 foot right there. That's a 50 foot coming out of here. That's the spillway for this, but 400 plus feet going through. And it's been done without permits, this part from here up and part of this in here. And it's the county's responsibility. And I'd like to see the county do something about it, because I'm flat getting tired of it and the lack of use of my property, which I pay dearly for agricultural purposes, and I can't use it for that. And I take it back that it is the county's responsibility. For those of you that would like to see it.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I know. You can take time for the auditor controller to get up and do a public comment of issues that are agenda items.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
If you would just take a deep breath and listen to what I was going to say. Would you mind providing a copy of that letter that you just read and pass it on to Diane?
No, I will give it to Mr. Edson. He's the only supervisor in this county of 3 supervisors in my district that's ever helped me. And he's interested. I will provide it to him. If he wants to share it with you, he can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so far for nothing.
Any additional public comments?
Thank you. My name is Dave Vacquez. I'm with California Waste Recovery, known as Cal Waste here in Calaveras County. I'm here just to kind of give you some information about myself and my company. We acquired the Calaveras service area back in June of 2013. We currently employ 27 people and have a $1.4 million payroll that we provide here in Calaveras County. Since being here, we've grown our customer base by 16%, bringing us to nearly 6,000 residents that we provide services to. We've since being here, we've increased the number of people who are on our Big Blue card recycling. Big Blue is not me, it's actually the blue card out at the curb. We've increased that by 3,000 customers have received a new blue card. Some of them had a blue card prior to that. We've increased, we're providing recycling services to 5,000 people of our 6,000 customers, and about 85% of our 5,800 customers do have the Big Blue recycling card or some form of recycling. And currently, when we sign a new service up, about 97% of our customers have opted for the blue card system. So we're finding great success in recycling here in the county. What does this really all have to do with Cal Waste and the whole recycling thing? Well, actually, Cal Waste travels that long trip out to Rock Creek Road every day, and we dispose of between 50 and 60 tons of refuse a day at Rock Creek. And based on the most current 2013 budget, Rock Creek is scheduled to close in the very near future. And we view this as our contribution or our opportunity to slow that closure date down, to delay the closing of that landfill. And we look to our customers, we look to the county to help us in cutting that date, pushing that date a little bit further out. There's a pretty big price tag to it, and maybe we can talk about that at another time.
20 seconds.
Okay, Calaveras, let's see, okay. Well, all that to say, we do have a regional material recovery facility that we operate down in Galt, California, where we process Amador, Calaveras, Sacramento County's material, along with Stanislaus and San Joaquin, and we welcome the opportunity and appreciate the opportunity to do business here in Calaveras County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, how's your green waste going?
Green waste, we currently provide green waste in the Rancho Calaveras area and around the golf course. We do provide in other pockets of the county. It's fairly successful in most of those areas. Where we're having a difficult time is in the rural areas. We've got one route that, we travel about 70 miles and we have about 30 pickups in the 70-mile area. So at some point, I think we need to, be realistic about the cost effectiveness of some of the really rural programs. But I think where you have some density, those programs have a place in the process. So we look forward to sitting down with the county sometime in the future to discuss those things.
So your recycling is picking up in the areas that...
Absolutely. We've added to the list of what is recyclable, and we have an outreach program where, on every billing we have some insert to educate our customers a little bit more. We're reaching out to the schools. Mary Beth is here today, and she's been working with the school districts to put into place a recycling program in all the schools, along with a program that we go into the classroom and talk to all the students about the importance of recycling, the resources that we have available to us when we go out to the recycling cart every day.
So the state is going to impose a higher recycling rate, right?
Well, right. The state has an objective of 75% recovery by the year 2020. Currently, the county is working diligently with their local enforcement plan to meet the current requirements, which are 50% recovery. We're working in a cooperative effort with the county staff to help us get there.
Great. Rita?
Yeah,
Supervisor Calaveras.
I just also want to thank your company and you for trying to become part of our community in addition to providing a service that we pay for. For the record, I am one of his customers, but you are out at community events. You donate whatever those bins are for community events, and the communities in District 3, I know, appreciate it. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, and we're really glad to be part of this community, and they have welcomed us with open arms, and we look forward to continuing that. This is where we make our living, and we want to contribute.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Additional public comments?
One more. I wasn't planning on it. I don't want to take too much of your time. I don't want to go to lunch. Peter Rage, Channel N. Hopefully the next few weeks that we can get a clear understanding of FEMA and what they're doing in this county. And I appreciate that Supervisor Stefanelli, Supervisor Spellman, Calaveras, their little get-together with Congressman Lundgren and his office, and FEMA and Army Corps of Engineers, so we can fully appreciate the hard work and the consequences of those hard work they achieved. Hopefully memory can be refreshed, and we don't have to get all the way down to FEMA and Army Corps of Engineers documentation of the accomplishment, because it does get quite a bit of effect on the whole county, from 2,400 flood zones to 7,400 flood zones, so it's affected the whole county, both property value and financially each one of those folks who are affected by the great work of FEMA. So let's hope that can be taken care of in the near future without having to go all the way to all those federal agencies and seek their memory of what understanding and consequences, what there appeared to be violation of the Brown Act at that time, that we can get this thing cleared up so everybody can appreciate the hard work those folks did. So let's get that cleared up. So we don't have to go clear it up for you. It might be a lot more efficient and financially less expensive to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Consent items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for discussion. Do any board members wish to remove an item off of consent? Any staff wish to remove an item off of consent?
Good morning, Robert Packinger, Public Works. We'd like to remove item number 8 and place that at a following meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other items from staff? Any public wish to remove an item? Mr. Reyes?
5 and 6, please.
5 and 6. Any other items? Okay. I'll entertain a motion from the board on the consent agenda, minus items 5, 6, and 8. I have a motion made by Supervisor Spellman, second by Supervisor Wright, to approve consent agenda as recommended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 5 is pulled on Public Works, approving a professional services agreement between Calaveras County and Brad Sutton Trucking for commercial truck hauling services for a total not to exceed $125,000 in a term ending June 30th, 2015, with an optional 3-year extension of $125,000 per fiscal year. And the question?
Yes, ma'am. I admire your intelligence and knowledge and insight of all your work you're doing. But on number 5, I noticed that the highest bidder is identified and et cetera, but there was 2 bidders that were lower than $125,000, I believe. I think there was $125,000 involved. But there's no copy of their proposed bidding. I admire your ability to make a decision without the full information to you. Not that I would ever question Public Works' judgment, but here it is, they're taking the highest bid, and without any factual, detailed reasoning, and you folks don't know what was the 2 other bids, it was not disclosed. So as much as I admire your ability to reason and knowledge and expertise, but how can you make a decision and vote on something where you don't have all the facts in front of you? Thank you.
Public Works?
Robert Packinger, Public Works. The bids received were from, there were 3 bids received: Destination Anywhere, LT Lehman Trucking, Brad Sutton. As is typical when we review the bids, we look for the bid forms being filled out correctly, bid bonds submitted, and so forth. In this case, Destination Anywhere, LK Lehman Trucking were considered non-responsive because they did not submit bid bonds. The bid documents were missing. The bid documents weren't filled out appropriately. There was no workers' compensation submitted as far as the items that were due. LK Lehman submitted just 1 quote sheet and didn't fill out the bid package. So those were the reasons that those 2 bids were rejected. The only bid that completely filled out all the requirements and was considered responsive at that point was Mr. Sutton's bid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on that item.
So moved.
I have a motion made by Supervisor Callaway and second by Supervisor Wright to approve the professional services agreement between Calaveras County and Brad Sutton Trucking for commercial truck hauling services for a total not to exceed $125,000 in a term ending June 30th, 2015, with an optional 3-year extension of $125,000 per fiscal year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Number 6 was pulled. Public Works approved the second amendment to the professional services agreement between Calaveras County and Mark Thomas and Company Incorporated for Stagecoach Road Bridge design services, bridge right-of-way, and environmental services to increase the agreement amount by $30,252 for a total not to exceed amount of $323,650.44 and a term extension to December 30th, 2015. The question?
Your raise, Jenny Lynn. I believe the whole organization and administration of this issue is basically your staff. Now, without going too much of the details about management of right-of-way, show me the stakes that's supposed to be out there. But what really bothers me is words like assumption. Are you hiring somebody who works on a Ouija board? Assumption? You're talking about money here. And you don't know what kind of money you're talking about. Next one. Number 1, it was felt it was sufficient right-of-way extension. Who the hell's paying an engineer for it being felt that it was assumption? Who are you hiring, idiots or engineers? Next one, traffic count disproportionately high. Are you hiring engineers or a Ouija board? I mean, I presume you're paying those folks adequately. My granddaughter can have filling. She can have disproportionate accounting. Who the hell's working for you, folks? That's tax money. I know it's no big deal. But you're talking about thousands of dollars. Every time you have a project, they always come back, hey, we need more money because we screwed up. Now, that's really nice, but they're screwing up on my money. Would you run a business like that if it was your own property, your own money? Get real. That's taxpayers' money, and if you have engineers that works like it was felt, assumptions, traffic disproportionately high, and what really bugs me, red light that fog can inhibit the area. So is a gorilla. Is there red light at frogs or not? Folks, I know it's only taxpayers' money, but I presume that you would not do this kind of practice, contracting with anybody for this kind of money, for this kind of work. If they screw up, it's still on your shoulders. We cannot do anything about those engineers who feel and assume and etc. on my money. I can only do something about you folks. Get to the bar, get their ass in gear, do a good work, as an engineer should, because the consequences is still going to be on you. Thank you.
Public Works, Robert?
Good morning, Robert Packager, Public Works. Let me take this opportunity to again reiterate my gratitude to you for the faith that you've placed in me. And I'm committed to serve, and I will continue to do my best. With regards to this item, the process when we enter into these projects is we award a contract to the engineering consulting group, and they will begin the process of engineering. During the process of engineering, developing designs, developing studies, things are discovered. These are things that when we initiate the consulting contract, we don't have knowledge of exactly. So in this case, in the process of coming up with the designs, they were able to determine that the toes of fills would be outside of the available right-of-way. So once we find that out, we need to now start discussions in negotiation with right-of-way. So those are things that happen during the course of the engineering process. During the time that we're doing the studies for the environmental work, there are things that we discover that are on site, and so we need to address those items. If when we enter into these consulting contracts, that money isn't there, we need to come back to the board and make the changes to the contract. So in a way, this is the normal way of going through these processes. We try to anticipate everything that we can so that we're not coming back to the board for changes in the future. But sometimes that's what happens when we find out during the course of a design that there are things there that we need to address.
So, Mr. Packinger, I'd like to confirm some information. So this is part of a CSA number 4, Diamond 20?
That's correct.
So there is a board there that oversees this particular CSA. So are they involved in this process or made aware of this process and where we stand with it?
They have been made aware. It's my understanding that at one time they felt that the proposed project was a bit too big and they were concerned about speeding through there. So staff and the engineering consultants took another look at what was expected as far as traffic on those roads. And based on that second look, they determined that a reduced footprint, a reduced width for that bridge would be appropriate. And it's more in keeping than with what the community down there wants. They didn't want this giant thing down there.
Right. So you've taken their comments and their concerns into consideration for this project?
That's correct.
As you've moved forward?
Yes.
All right. And the monies from this project comes from where?
Those monies, as explained in the report, we have the money from the HPP program. That's the base source for the funding for all of these bridge projects. And then there's also the toll credit amounts that are used for the local match for the program.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments? I'll entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make the motion to approve that. I would like to make a comment.
Okay, let me get a second on that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Supervisor Wright, second. Supervisor Spellman, your comment?
I would like, for the sake of the audience that may be here for the first time, or maybe people that have not heard Mr. Rose's renditions before, that he's being very disingenuous and extremely enjoys the sound of his own voice.
Mr. Spellman, can we
I will
into this
continue.
item?
I will just bear with me. I'll try to make it brief. Mr. Reyes, before his retirement, owned a European repair shop in the Eastern Bay Area. And so I'm going to put it in terms that he can
Mr.
understand.
Spellman, can
I'll
we
be with you in just a moment. Please bear with me.
I'm going to ask for the vote if this is going to be a personal attack.
No, it's not. I'm giving an analogy so that Mr. Reyes and other people can understand Mr. Packinger's job and the job that we've asked people to do. At one time, when I was better well paid for my expertise and skills, I owned a Porsche. You used to own a European auto repair place, okay?
Mr. Spellman.
When somebody brings their automobile in and says that they've got a problem with it, you take a test drive, and based on the noises or jiggles or sounds it makes, you make an estimate, and you say, I think that this is the problem, and it should be about this much to fix it. However, when I come back to pick up my vehicle, or when you place a phone call to me to determine what needs to be done, oftentimes there are other things that are discovered in the process of repair of the vehicle that cause the price of the transaction to increase. And so it is with Mr. Packinger and our Public Works Department. These are fine individuals who are professionals in their own right, and sometimes there are things that are discovered in the course of their work that cause the cost to go up and to be increased. And that's not something that I take lightly for someone to stand here and pontificate and call into question the integrity of the professionals that this county hires for our services and the way that we spend our tax dollars. Thank you.
I have a motion made by Supervisor Spellman and second by Supervisor Wright to approve the Second Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement between Calaveras County and Mark Thomas and Company, Inc. for Stagecoach Road Bridge Design Services, Bridge Right-of-Way and Environmental Services to increase the agreement amount by $30,252 for a total not to exceed $323,650.44 in a term extension to December 30th, 2015. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And item number 8 was pulled by Public Works to be addressed at a later date. As noted on the agenda, a lunch break at noon. We're going to continue through our regular agenda, and we will break about 11:45 so that we can attend the Senior of the Year luncheon in San Andreas. We will work through this portion of the agenda all the way through items 16 and 17. 16 and 17 will be addressed after lunch and prior to the budget hearing. Moving on to the regular agenda, we have item number 12, Health and Human Services. Approve and authorize the chair to sign an agreement with Consumer Self-Help Center for the operation of a wellness and recovery center for adults with serious mental illness in the amount not to exceed $290,000 for the period September 1, 2014 through June 30th, 2016. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Supervisors. Mary Sawicki, Director of Calaveras Health and Human Services. The agency provided a request for proposal as a result of the need to have a competitive process for a health and wellness recovery center for Calaveras County. Due to the previous contract having expired on June 30th of 2014, it went out to roughly about 30 groups for an RFP process. There were 3 bidders for the process. There was an impartial panel selected for this particular RFP as a result for the selection process at the request of the current, or shall I say, the previous contractor having made some statements about wanting to make sure that it was an impartial panel. So we did so. We did have that panel review the 3 bids, and they selected the Consumer Self-Help Center and made that recommendation for a contract for 22 months. That amount would be $290,000 for the Health and Wellness Center for San Andreas, to be run here in San Andreas, excuse me. The Consumer Self-Help Center has been running a health and wellness center in Sacramento County. They've been in existence since 1989, so it's not as if they're a brand new organization. And we did indeed check references on the group, and they came very well recommended, as we do on anyone who applies for any type of business here with us. Since July 1, we actually have been operating the Health and Wellness Center through our own behavioral health services. We have had 109 unduplicated clients being served, so there is definitely a need for the service. The agreement will allow 7 hours a day, 4 days a week service, and we are hoping that you will accept the recommendation of the panel as well as the agency that this contract go forward. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions on this agreement? No more questions? Any public comments?
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, County Council. My name is Jennifer Dower. I'm an attorney with Diepenbrock Elkin. I practice primarily public contract law, and I'm here today to comment on behalf of Mental Health America of Northern California. You may have received yesterday afternoon or perhaps this morning a copy of the protest to the award of the contract that we filed. And I'm here to address some of the issues in that protest. First, as you heard, there was an RFP issued. What you may not know is that there was an original RFP issued. Bids were accepted. In fact, we understand the intended awardee's bid was not responsive to that bid, but the agency decided that rather than reject that bid and award to one of the other bidders, they would reject all bids and go back out with a second RFP, which they were entitled to do. But there were some critical changes that were made in that second RFP which are relevant to the issues that we have here today. First of all, part of the scope of work of the services that were required were copied directly from the bid of the intended awardee, the first bid. And so you have an indication that the people who were looking at this had predetermined that they had a bidder that they were interested in awarding to by making the RFP parallel those services. More importantly for us in this process is that in the original RFP there was a protest process that was available. And what that would do, it would allow my client or any other bidder who had a complaint about the award to bring their concerns to the agency, have a response from the intended awardee and from the agency, and to allow all of those issues to be resolved in that process rather than bringing it here. Unfortunately, that process was removed from the RFP. And in fact, my client asked the agency, they said, "Did you intend to remove this RFP process?" And the agency said yes. So I don't know why they did that, but what we have here is we now have numerous problems with the award and the evaluation of the contract that have not been fully and fairly vetted, that you have not had the opportunity to review and hear both sides to make your determination. And the third major change in the RFP was very concerning to me as an attorney, and that was that bidders were threatened that if they approached you, the board, or others, with their concerns, that their proposal would be subject to rejection. By my very appearing here right now, the agency has said that their proposal will be subject to rejection, and that is absolutely violative of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which guarantees the right to petition government and to be heard. So not only was there no protest process, but bidders were in fact threatened not even to bring their concerns to the Board of Supervisors. So we obviously didn't do that, but I would ask that you take that into consideration in deciding what to do. And specifically, we ask that you take this detailed protest, send it back to the agency, direct the agency to review the issues that are in the protest, not to reject my client's proposal for exerting its First Amendment rights, and to come back to you with a response to these serious questions. And let me give you an idea of what those questions are.
Your 3 minutes is up.
I'm sorry, I understood that there was not a 3-minute limitation on addressing on an agenda item.
Per item.
Okay. Would you please allow me to address at a high level some of the flaws, because I think they are critical flaws.
I think we allow other public comments at this time on this item, so I'm going to excuse you at this point.
Okay.
I'm interested on who threatened. What were the names of the people that did the threatening? To whom did they threaten?
The RFP itself contains the threat to bidders, where it states, while I find the specific statement, but it says that should any bidder lobby, is what they call it, that the proposal will be subject to being rejected. And it specifically defines lobbying as approaching the Board of Supervisors with an intent to try to convince them to accept or not accept a proposal.
So that was, it's done to all bidders, not just to yours?
Absolutely, to all bidders.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public comments on this item?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board of Supervisors. My name is Susan Calaveras, and as you know, I'm the Executive Director of Mental Health America of Northern California. I had hoped that Jennifer could really talk to some of the legal issues so that I wouldn't have to, but perhaps Danielle can wrap that up after me. But I find myself here before you again today to protest the contract award for the San Andreas Wellness and Recovery Center. It is not a pleasant position for me to be in. Believe me, I'd much rather be watching the new release of the next best thing from Apple. However, I'm here to ask that you do give a very thoughtful review of our protest letter. That's the only opportunity that we've had. We had no opportunity to protest or bring these things to light before now. No public announcement had been made as to who the contracted agency was going to be until today. And so this is our very first opportunity to even begin to protest. And there are a lot of wrongdoings that happened throughout the RFP process. And I really don't have time to go into all of them. But if you read the letter, you will see that they're all in there. I do want to remind you that we did do a very successful job of performing all of our deliverables when we were operating the living room. We even exceeded expectations. We worked very hard to provide outreach to underserved communities who heretofore had not been served in Calaveras County. We had over 30 Spanish-speaking clients that were being served by a promotora who was volunteering her time at the agency. And a fundamental component to the Mental Health Services Act is reaching those underserved communities. And they really have not been served in your mental health system here in Calaveras County. Another population that we were very successful in reaching out to and providing self-help supports to was the LGBTQ community. Again, another very invisible population in this county. And folks came to the center because they felt very comfortable with the leadership and with the facilitators who were operating those groups. there's no mention of that in our competitor's proposal and how they'll provide that outreach to those underserved communities or how they'll provide services to those underserved communities. And it takes time. And it took us close to a year to be able to get to a point where we had trusting relationships with these communities where they felt comfortable coming to our center. And so to really, kind of uproot all of that at this point is really not beneficial to the community. Not to mention that, the entire RFP process was laden with favoritism, with the cutting pasting of the original proposal from our competitor into the new RFP. We felt like that was really very egregious. It really showed the intent of the county to favor that competitor over us.
20 seconds.
In any case, we continued to leave the center open the last couple of months for 2 days a week, even though we had no funding, because there were still some clients that said they didn't feel safe going to the annex, that still wanted to come to our center. We did that at our own cost and continue to do that. But we've been told by several clients that they are not allowed to come to the center, that they were told by county staff, their clinicians, their therapists. And these are very vulnerable clientele. I mean, it's really important that we don't involve ourselves in this kind of coercive action. And so I just ask, really, my final comment is that I ask that you review the information, that you review the evidence, and that you give us a fighting chance to redeem ourselves, because we really haven't done anything to deserve this treatment, and it's pretty egregious. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments on this item?
Hi, good morning. I'm Danielle Zavala. I am General Counsel and the Associate Director for Mental Health America of Northern California. I just wanted to follow up on some of the details that Jennifer was not able to get into as her time expired. Specifically, the issues that we're having with the way our proposal was scored and with the overall conduct of the scores in the RFP, the second RFP process, is that they failed to follow the actual requirements that were stated in the RFP. They didn't check references of the bidders. They didn't apply a local bidder a business preference, which our agency actually qualified for. And in applying the requirement of a demonstrated history of providing similar services to comparable entities, it is true that Consumer Self-Help Center has been running a center in Sacramento County since 1989, which, by the way, our agency helped to establish. However, Sacramento County is not a comparable entity to Calaveras County. There are different demographics, there are different challenges that running a wellness center in a rural setting or in a rural area provide. And we have 5 years experience running a center in neighboring Amador County, so we are familiar with many of the challenges that are particularly applicable to rural areas and servicing clients there. In addition, the scorers applied new and different criteria that was not stated in the RFP, which violates the decision in the recent California Appellate Court decision in Eel River versus Humboldt. Specifically, they did not consider the cost factor. They didn't apply the total cost. We were the lowest bid. We came in $5,000 under the selected bid, and if we had received the 3% local bidder preference, we would have been $10,000 under the proposal that they did select. I'm sorry, sorry, I thought I heard something over there. They considered whether the budget adequately supported costs, which the scorers were actually applying different criteria and really assessing the bidder's responsibility rather than their ability to carry forward whether they met the RFP requirements in the budget. Thank you. The scorers had no expertise in evaluating mental health services or a program structure, so they were really not in the best position to understand whether or not our cost proposal was adequate. Finally, we believe that the scorers treated the bidders differently. They did not apply the same criteria in the same manner to the fiscal management experience or on-site management requirements, and that resulted in erratic scoring. So we ask that you do consider the full text of the protest that we've submitted, because the evidence should speak for itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this item? Bonnie Nolan from Double Springs. This program's run by the mental health or behavioral health department, and it's a drop-in program, a drop-in center, if I'm understanding correctly. And I'm concerned if this drop-in center is providing services to clients with traumatic brain injury. Now, I know the mental health department is relieved. Medi-Cal does not provide services for traumatic brain injury, but I have found a way around that exclusion, which is the people with traumatic brain injury also suffer from bipolar. They also suffer from depression, all of the symptoms that mental health does provide services for. Now, my experience with the last drop-in center, when I had a client that was allowed to come to the drop-in center, was because he was handicapped and he urinated on the floor, he was not welcome anymore unless I accompanied him and I cleaned up the mess. And that was really, it was disgusting to find out that that was the determination that disallowed this person from having interaction with other people or giving the care provider some rest or respite. So I'm not sure. If we're talking about the living room, that was not what my client participated in, but it was a drop-in center. And my concern is there is a segment of the mentally ill or people who have mental issues that cannot be served because of that one little description, traumatic brain injury. So that would be my concern, that that segment of our population is served and is allowed to participate, and there's consideration that, yeah, they make messes sometimes, they drop food and they have accidents, and that's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you. Any additional public comments?
David Sirius, Town Council's office. This is their opportunity for protest. Last night was delivered a written protest. It's the board's prerogative to delay a decision until the department head issues a written response of their own, or you can act on your own. That it's the board's prerogative to proceed as they wish. But what you need to look at slightly differently is this is their protest. There are no time limitations. If they want more time to present their oral argument, please allow them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other public comments?
Yes, I'm Douglas Barker. I'm a client of America. I'm also one of those 109 documented people that walked into the annex over there. Or the annex. I do realize it's operated partially by the county. I could not get the help that I needed to get through there. I'm one of those persons that falls in the gap, where I'm no longer qualified for medical or help from the county, but I don't have enough because of other outstanding obligations and unfortunate circumstances in life. I don't have enough to be able to pay for some of the stuff. Within 10 minutes of walking into Mental Health America's living room, I had the help lined up that I needed to have. I am very appreciative of them. I've been homeless, and they've helped me get off the streets. I don't know as if the one that you're intending to award the contract to will work with such people as me or not. And I stood up here before and said, it's taken me a year to entrust these people. So now you're going to take that away from us, from the clients. It takes a long time to entrust people. When you've been hurt bad, real bad, it becomes mental issues, and it takes a long time to regain trust, to build trust. And I would just urge you to consider the process of moving that from Mental Health America to another, quote, new thing where, guess what, I've got to rebuild. I'm sure you've all gone to the doctor one time looking for a diagnosis, and he says, you got to do rehabilitation, and you've got to do this. And he doesn't find the answer to it, so you go to another doctor, and he sets out on the same path, doing the same thing you just did, because he says they might have done it wrong.
30 seconds.
You know, so keep that in consideration of hurting the people that are out there and setting them back in their progress that they've already done for a year, and they'll have to turn around and redo it again for another year. You're keeping them stagnant. You're not allowing them to grow anymore. You know? And thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Hess. I'm an employee of Mental Health America, but I'm also a recipient of County Behavioral Health Services. The Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center operated by Mental Health America was a place where many consumers received and used opportunities to move forward in their recovery. Many consumers are frustrated with the decision by Behavioral Health to drop their contract with Mental Health America just to turn around and give it to a different organization who will be offering essentially the same program. I am disappointed that Behavioral Health made a minimal attempt to integrate Mental Health America into a collaborative group offering mental health services for our county. Another similar organization, NAMI, has a representative on the Mental Health Board, where Mental Health America staff have been asked to not even attend consumer groups that are debating how services should be, or what services should be created in the county. So even though we are consumers as well, our voices have been silent simply because we work and we're peer support. I urge the new leadership of Behavioral Health to establish a policy of collaboration. Otherwise, this new center will not succeed either. The behavioral health consumers deserve to have those offering services to act with professionalism and integrity in a collaborative manner. I feel strongly that if this was happening, Mental Health America would still be operating the Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center. Thank you.
Any additional public comments?
Hi. My name is Ellen. I'm a volunteer at the Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center and at the Annex, and I'm a grateful recipient of Calaveras County Mental Health Services. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I first want to say thank you to all who support and ensure the mental health and well-being of our community. Funding provided by the Mental Health Services Act is greatly appreciated in whatever form, shape, label, name, agency that it is ultimately determined to best fit our needs. I will eternally be grateful to Mental Health America of Northern California for bringing their quality services and support to Calaveras County. In operation of the Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center that was opened April 22, 2015. It was under their leadership and guidance that I was empowered as an active participant in my own life, and I felt the success of a contributing citizen of our community as a volunteer there. In this experience, I witnessed the creation of an environment that held true to the 5 concepts of a wellness recovery action plan with hope, personal responsibility, education, self-advocacy, and support. It was a living, breathing space filled with every dimension of wellness, including physical, emotional, social, spiritual, intellectual, and environmental, in manifestation of the program coordinator's vision. A variety of peer-run support groups and activities were offered through the day, serving to promote and enhance every individual's unique mental health, wellness, and recovery. It was in that safe and supportive environment that I began to believe in myself again. I found that I could indeed live a happy and productive life in spite of, and perhaps even as a result of, the challenges and limitations caused by my own personal encounter with both physical and mental illness. I developed valuable and mutually supportive relationships with my peers and the staff. With Mental Health America of Northern California, Calaveras County already had in place and running successfully what looks to me like the contractual responsibilities of a new contractor will be
30 seconds.
in the operation of a consumer's self-help wellness and recovery center. I question the wisdom in replacing something that didn't appear to me to be broke with something that promises to provide the same thing under another name. What was the point? Was it worth the disruption of continuity and care for the people in our community? How can I have faith that a wellness and recovery center under new operation will stay? How can I now build a trusting relationship with new staff members that I count on for emotional support, when I know they can be taken out of my life just as quickly by no choice of my own? As a volunteer at the Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center under operation by Mental Health America, I dared to dream I was part of a wonderful development in our community. I found a place where I no longer felt like a consumer, but rather like a peer supporter. I felt respected, appreciated, encouraged, and supported in pushing myself beyond what I believed I could do, facilitating the program coordinator's vision in a 6 dimensions of wellness group. I do not assume to know all, nor do I envy the board's responsibility in making a decision about the operation of a place they can only know about from the testimony of others, some with very different views and perspectives from my own. I only know what I saw with my own eyes at the Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center, the positive difference the staff of Mental Health America made in my life.
Ma'am, are you about?
Yes, I am. And those loss. Okay. And the loss I feel for myself and the community in a decision to no longer support this valuable lifeline I've hung on to. I last stood before you on May 13, 2014, and I spoke in support of Mental Health America to continue an operation of the Living Room Wellness and Recovery Center. I hope my voice and the voice of many others would make a difference in your final decision.
Thank you.
Today I speak in hope that the future decisions about funding of any wellness and recovery center are made in a timely manner after a thorough investigation into all the pertinent issues with transparency and due process given to all, and all having been given a chance for their voice to be heard by this governing board of supervisors.
Thank you.
And in closing, I thank you.
Any additional public comments?
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Max Siebel. I work for Mental Health America Northern California. I serve as the patient's rights advocate for Amador and Calaveras County. So at the time the living room was being operated, I did spend several days, weeks, months there. I also spend time in Amador County representing clients of mental health services. I would like to speak on a concern voiced earlier by the public. My lady, I can't remember her name. She was concerned whether or not individuals with traumatic brain injuries would be welcome. I can speak on my behalf as one of the staff at the living room that I have a sister a year younger than I with developmental and physical disabilities. So that means I have 29 years of lived experience working with individuals that wouldn't necessarily classify as mental health service needing, but definitely suffer the symptoms. I'm just one example of the staff at the living room that would openly welcome individuals with any kind of physical or mental disability that are also in need of mental health services. So I hope you keep that in mind. And for the lady who was concerned, The living room would provide those services for your child. Thank you.
Any additional public comments? Okay, so Megan, I need some direction here. Since we're receiving this protest, hard copies now, email last night, doesn't give the board much of a chance to review each and every particular item. We heard some public comments. There apparently is additional public comments that wish to be made. Is this something that we can defer until the next meeting to allow board members time to review these items, allow county council to comment, option to give back to the committee to review some items in this protest, or continue the additional public comments that were identified that they wish to be made?
You do have the option to continue the matter altogether. As far as the process for the protest, allowing them additional time to speak on the protest, that would be this time that they would be provided. The actual process for that, I would defer to David Sirius. He is the attorney that's been working with the bid process. And so if there's additional questions on the actual procedure for it, I would defer to him to respond to that.
So David, if we continue more public comment on this particular item that was identified earlier,
Yes,
take that into consideration? I mean,
because there was a time limit on public, I want to talk about public comment, I want to talk about the protest.
Okay.
The principals and the agents of the protester, if they want more time to speak, this is the time to do it. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you want the department head to actually reply substantively in writing to what they received, that can be done if you authorize the department head to either write a response or have an agent write a response on her behalf.
Okay.
But yes, I am concerned that the protesters weren't allowed to finish their statements, and I think it's the appropriate time to do that now.
Okay. And I guess I was confused on that, as asking for public comments. What was a true protest, you might say, to this response, or in general to the process?
And I just wanted to clarify that the protest, the additional time for the protest would be those that are actually launching the protest. So there's the public comment period for the general public to comment on the agenda item, and then there is the additional time for the protesters to actually put forward what they are protesting with the process or the bid or whatever the protest is.
Okay. Is there any comments from the board on this item on how best to proceed? If we want to refer this back to staff to review the protest, to respond to that with county council, if we want to continue the protest information at this point to take into consideration?
I'd like to hear from Mary Squeaky.
My feeling is if Mental Health of America wants to continue their protest, now let them do it now. I don't want that dragged out. And then give the department head the option to respond, preferably in writing. I mean, I agree with you, this is way too much material. I have some real concerns of some of the comments that have already been made by MHA. It's a dysfunctional relationship between the county and MHA, and the goal are the clients. That should be upmost in their minds. I think it's true for both of them, but there's something skewed in this relationship. I have questions on things, threats that were alluded to. I don't deal well with threats that are alluded to, that if there were threats made, I want to know who made them and to whom. So I have a concern with that. I have quite a few questions. One saying we should have been given local bidder preference, and yet from the Department of State, their business address is Sacramento. So there's lots of little things going on here which really take away from some of the key issues that Mental Health of America is stating, and the process that our Health and Human Service Agency went through. And I don't think we're going to finish that today, but I think if the Mental Health of America has other things that they would like to address, then now is the time they should do it. And then I'd like to see it sent back to the department and county council to look at some of these items.
Okay. Any other board comments?
Sure. I'd like to see them continue their opportunity for discussion, and give Mary a chance to respond to that and get on with it.
Okay. Supervisor Spelman?
I think based on counsel given by David Sirius from our county counsel's office, that we owe Ms. Dower and her clients an opportunity to, verbalize their protest, that they have a legal right to do such, it seems to me. So I'm in favor of allowing them to do so, lest it be said that we, trampled on anybody's rights. Don't want to go there.
Supervisor Wright? Okay, so we'll continue to allow the protest information, responses, concerns. I think we'll take all of this into consideration, and I hear consensus from the board then to take that into consideration and refer back to staff and county council to be able to respond.
Great. Thank you very much, board members. I appreciate the opportunity. Before I get into the issues and the protests, I did look in the RFP on page 10 of 36 is the lobbying language. Any party submitting a proposal or a party representing a proposer shall not influence or attempt to influence any member of the selection committee, any member of the board of supervisors, or any employee of the county of Calaveras with regard to the acceptance of a proposal. So that was the language that I was referring to. Back to the issues of the protest. They are detailed, in some detail, complete with citations to the scoring sheets that were provided to my client, representing that those were the evaluation sheets that were done, with citations to the proposals that were submitted, citations to the request for proposals under which the contract is being awarded, and the county's answers to the question and answer opportunity that was provided. So all of that documentation, that's most of the volume that you see here, and I have provided the complete copies of the proposals and the RFP so that you have them available. I don't know that we had complete copies for everyone, but we can certainly get those to you. So at a high level, because there are so many issues here, there were some critical flaws in the award which, if the county proceeds, will make the contract that's awarded void. Under California law, if a contract is void, the Constitution prohibits payment thereon, and it permits for recovery of all funds that were paid on that contract. This is why it is so critical to look at these issues seriously, and I appreciate the fact that you are going to do so. Of course, my client wants the contract, but I'm sure that the intended awardee doesn't want to perform for free either. So there were, as my colleague said, there was a failure to follow the requirements in the RFP. When a public entity goes out to bid, it is bound by to comply with a number of things. One, of course, is statutes or constitutions, regulations, local ordinances, the law. But it is also bound to comply with what it says it's going to do in its solicitation document, how it tells the bidders it is going to evaluate the proposals, and it must evaluate those proposals on a level playing field. There is, throughout numerous cases and in fact in statute, there is a clear and repeated recognition that part of the public bidding process is to avoid even the appearance, even the possibility of favoritism, fraud, or corruption in the awarding of public contracts. And the way you do that is, as I said, by having that level playing field, by making sure that each proposal is judged against the standards of the RFP, not against another proposal. They are not to be compared against one another, and not against some arbitrary opinions which are unstated and not told to the proposers so that they can bid to those standards. So what happened here, as we said, there was a failure to follow requirements. Bidders were required to submit references, and the RFP expressly said that the bidder's experience would be verified by those references. Now, I heard the comment before I got up that said we did check references. Well, that's very interesting because there was nothing in the score sheets that even mentioned references. So those people who were awarding the scores apparently were not told to check references and did not check or note that they checked the references. My client requested public records and was provided public records of the evaluation by the agency. And there was nothing, they have not been provided all the records that they requested. But they did request the evaluation records, and there was nothing in those records indicating that references had been checked. And so all we know, all you know, is that there's no record whatsoever of doing what the RFP required, which is checking those references as part of the evaluation process. We do know that the local business preference was not checked or awarded. Now, there was a question as to whether my client qualifies for the local business preference, and as addressed in our protest, under the code, the Calaveras Code, they do qualify. They have had a business location established for more than 6 months at the time of the RFP, and they did submit their local business license as part of their proposal to demonstrate that they are, in fact, a local business and are entitled to that preference. However, that preference was not applied. The preference required by law was not applied to their price, and in fact, the local bidder, or the location of the bidder was identified as a separate evaluation criteria under the narrative, and it was not evaluated, and the proposers, or the evaluators, the evaluation sheets did not reflect that the local bidder preference was evaluated there. One of the standards, and again, as my colleague said, one of the standards for judging whether or not the bidder had the experience to perform the contract was specifically stated in the RFP. They had to have a demonstrated history of providing similar services to comparable entities. That is a standard by which they were to be scored and evaluated. And as was disclosed to you, my client has a lengthy history of providing services in rural areas, both similar areas and specifically in this area, I believe, for 3 years, although they've been here for about a year, in this clinic for about a year. So they do have that immediate experience with rural areas as well as with other areas. The intended awardee, in their discussion of their experience, stated only Sacramento County. So they have a limited experience. Does that mean they should be thrown out? No. And we are not suggesting that they should be thrown out. But what we are saying is that one of the standards mandated by the RFP by which the proposals were to be judged was not stated in the evaluation sheets. And the intended awardee received a substantially higher score from some of the evaluators than my client did, although my client had more direct and immediate and relevant experience. And as you heard, there are certainly some issues that come up in rural areas that are important to have an experience with and to understand how to address. Another area where there was a flaw in the evaluation was that the RFP specifically required the cost proposal to separately state certain items. So there was a list of things. You have to tell us what your rent is going to be. You have to tell us certain things. They were laid out. They were required. The intended awardee, on 4 of those areas, the intended awardee did not separately state those items. Now, again, are we saying that they should be thrown out for this? No. But the agency must have had a reason for specifically calling out those areas that it wanted to see separately identified in the budget. And this bidder didn't do it, and they were not marked down for it. They were scored higher, and on the budget, they were scored almost at maximum points by the evaluators. 2 of them scored them at 23 out of 25, and 1 of them scored at 25 out of 25. So whether it was budget or, frankly, program narrative, where they were supposed to consider, does the proposal include all required components in an organized manner, similarly there, the intended awardee was scored higher, although they omitted this. And one evaluator scored them at 48 out of 50, another 47, and another 46. So, and that issue, the issue of not having those required items, was not noted on any of the evaluation sheets. The evaluation team also applied new or different criteria. Now, there's a fairly recent case, again, in the appellate court, Eel River versus Humboldt County. And in that case, the county went out with an RFP for services. They received the proposals, they evaluated the proposals, and when they got the award, the board, in awarding the contract, decided that it wanted to consider something that hadn't been an evaluation factor, and awarded based on that. It went up to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal said you can't do that. If you're going to consider something an evaluation factor, it must be stated in the RFP. The proposers must be given notice of what you're going to evaluate on. You don't get to change your mind later, because you're not then evaluating based on a level playing field, and you are opening the door to the possibility of favoritism. If you can wait until after the proposals are in and look at what people have said and then change how you're going to evaluate, even if there's nothing wrong with what you did, it doesn't look good. It looks like somebody is hiding the ball. It looks like there's something improper going on. Most critically in the protest, cost was clearly an important issue. Cost was to be evaluated. There were 25 points that were to be awarded for cost. But when my client asked about how the proposals would be evaluated, there was no specific information. And I'll tell you, one way that cost is frequently evaluated is to take the low bidder's cost divided by the bidder that you're evaluating, multiplied by the number of points, and that's how you get it. So it's a proportional amount of cost. This is a very common way to evaluate it, but when evaluating cost, the dollars should be considered, and they didn't. There was no indication in the scoring sheets. The evaluators were not asked to consider who submitted the lowest cost. It wasn't considered, was not an evaluation factor. And my client did, in fact, submit the lowest cost, even lower if the local bidder preference is applied. But they were scored down lower in cost. Why? Well, what was actually applied for the cost were 2 questions. Did the budget adequately support the cost? And is the budget cost effective? Now, there's no standards stated in the RFP and the evaluation sheets. Certainly, nowhere that bidders were told that those were the standards that were going to be applied, and the evaluators were not given standards for evaluating these. This is absolutely critical, because what you're saying is you are asking those evaluators, look at a budget and you tell me, is the bidder capable of performing using that budget? Is the bidder capable of performing? Well, my client has been performing that very contract using those budget numbers for over a year. They have more extensive experience in other contracts performing, using their knowledge to put together a budget to explain how they can perform. And the evaluators marked them down. They marked them down for effectively saying, you can't perform for that cost. There's no basis for that conclusion. And in fact, of the 3 evaluators that were selected, none has an apparent background in mental health services or the operation of a clinic. There's no indication that there was an expert brought in. the evaluators simply decided, well, we don't think you can do it. Well, that's not the standard. That's not what was provided. And in fact, what that is a responsibility determination. A responsibility determination looks at whether or not a bidder is capable of performing as they have committed. My client committed to perform all of the required services in the contract, and they committed to do so for their bid price. Should the contract be awarded to them, they would be obligated to perform for that bid price. What the evaluators did was say, it is so clear to us that you can't perform it that we're going to mark you down. And again, there was no basis for that, but what they have to do by law, if you are going to address responsibility, is you have to tell the bidder, well, we're going to look at your responsibility, and here's why we don't think you can perform. Here's the evidence that you can't perform for that. Now, you, bidder, have the chance to come back and tell us, prove to us that you can, in fact, perform. That's how a responsibility determination works. That's not what happened here. And in fact, it looks like the evaluators didn't, in fact, apply the standards that were stated on the cost sheet. Now, we know very little about what they did because their evaluation, the rationale is limited to some very cryptic notes, and one of the three evaluators provided no notes at all. But we do know, for example, Teresa Dominguez rated my client 20 out of 25 points. Her comments that could even possibly relate to budget was, management seems top-heavy, need more to support volunteers. Believe there needs to be more supervision in the center than currently there. So she was making a judgment as to management. Now, I find it very curious that that she apparently scored my client down for management seeming top-heavy. My client's management for this is they do have an on-site supervisor, which I think, frankly, is important to have, somebody who is in charge of running the operation. The only other management that they had was that my client provided in detail in their proposal a description of the various management of the organization as opposed to the on-site management. So they discussed their executive director. So did the intended awardee. My client also discussed the fact that they have an accountant on staff, which is very important when you're looking at fiscal issues. One of the things that the RFP said would be evaluated. They mentioned that they have an attorney on staff as an associate director. And they mentioned that they have higher level management. But that's management of the overall organization. And my client actually detailed how much time they anticipated those folks spending on this contract. And it was not an extensive amount of time. So I don't know what she meant by management is top-heavy, but it is interesting that if somebody is complaining that there is oversight or accounting resources or legal resources that are available if issues come up, and complaining about supervision. Now, it's again interesting that she says management is top-heavy, but there needs to be more supervision. Now, for whatever reason, she apparently marked down my client for lack of supervision, but my client has an on-site supervisor, and the intended awardee does not. In their proposal, they proposed 2 employees. We don't know who they are because they don't detail anything about who those people might be, but no on-site supervision. And yet, she did not mark down the intended awardee for lack of supervision. And so you see here, not only is there a question as to what she's doing, but there is clearly an inconsistent application of whatever standards are being applied that are not stated in the RFP, and perhaps not even those stated in the scoring sheets. So you have someone who is applying this amorphous criteria that does not, in fact, ensure that bidders are treated equally. It has resulted in bidders being treated unfairly. So, the fiscal management, there were a couple of other examples of bidders being treated differently. So in fiscal management, my client was, again, marked down. It's unclear why. because the only indication of why they were marked down for fiscal management is that the fiscal management aspect on the scoring sheet was circled. There's no comment, there's no note, but the circle appears to indicate that they were marked down. And with 2 issues identified, they were marked down 40 to 40 points, 10 points. So if they were in fact marked down equally, that's 5 points. That's a pretty significant reduction for fiscal management. You would think that they had really a very weak fiscal management discussion. In fact, they had a very robust fiscal management discussion. They discussed, again, their accountant. They discussed the processes that they use. They discussed the fact that they are a member of an organization which overlooks their processes. They had a very robust fiscal management discussion. The intended awardee, by comparison, had almost no discussion of fiscal management other than to note that they have an annual audit and there have not been audit exceptions. But they didn't propose an accountant, an auditor in there, other than the external auditor. So, and to the extent that they were marked down for fiscal management, they could not have been marked down more than 2 points by only one of the evaluators. So again, you have a robust discussion which receives a greater markdown than a very summary surface discussion. And the other, as I mentioned before, was the on-site management. My client has an on-site supervisor and was marked down for it. The other bidder does not and was not marked down for it. So staffing judgments were critical, as you can tell from my earlier comments. Obviously, the evaluators made judgments on what staffing they thought should be there. But one of the factors that was required to be evaluated by the RFP was the experience and expertise of the staff that was proposed to be running this program. You heard from the community that this is a critical program for them and central to their lives and well-being. Who are the people who are going to run this program? Well, my client identified the specific on-site manager, or supervisor. They identified the people who would be underneath that supervisor. They identified, as I said, their remote management so that you knew that there was expertise. And they noted that in order to perform their contract, they were requiring 18 to 25 volunteers a month to support the program. This is what their experience had shown, and this is something that the intended awardee could have determined had they looked into the background of the program. What the intended awardee proposed, as I said, was 2 personnel without supervision on site. They also proposed, and my client, with those people that it proposed, included both descriptions of the positions and the resumes of the people, so that the evaluators could see these people were highly qualified and experienced personnel, and so should have been scored very high in personnel. By comparison, the intended awardee had no specific personnel identified except their executive director. They did not have the on-site people identified. They had a description of what they would do, but they didn't have them identified. They did not identify who would deal with their language issues, whereas my client identified who would deal with the Spanish-speaking issues. They did not provide their executive director's resume. The only person who they specifically mentioned, they didn't provide that resume. And so there was some discussion in their proposal about the person's background. And in fact, 2 of the evaluators noted that there was no resume of the executive director provided. But then in the evaluation, they weren't really marked down for it. One evaluator marked them down 3 points and the other one 2 points, and they had identified other issues. So 1 point, 2 points. The intended awardee also budgeted for 10 volunteers when the experience is that it would require almost double. So again, are we saying that the intended awardee should be thrown out? No. But what we're saying is one of the factors that was required to be evaluated was the experience and expertise of your staffing and who you were proposing. And when you have one bidder that submits resumes, specific people, actual experience, and another that says, well, we're going to hire some people, the one that provides the actual details should have received the higher score and did not. And in fact, if you look in the budget, there was this question of management. Did my client have enough management? If you look in the budget of the intended awardee, the only management they propose, they have no on-site management. The only management they propose is in overhead. And the annual budget their budget was $5,300 for that oversight. And if you're looking at $5,300 works out to, if it's the executive director, if that person makes $53,000 a year, which would be a very low salary for someone in that position, you would be looking at 4 hours of work. 4 hours of management for the year. And they were not scored down for lack of supervision or management. 4 hours, maybe 4 hours for the management. So there are, as you see, there are a number of very critical issues. The intended awardee was required to propose a lunch program. They did not address a lunch program in their bid, and they were not marked down for it. The evaluators overlooked responsive information in my client's proposal, including information on community resources. My client was marked down for not having a referral and follow-up process. And as we discussed in our protest, their proposal specifically states that they will provide an individualized RAP plan for the participants. And that RAP plan includes identifying the resources, the community resources. So they do provide those referrals through the plan process. And how do they follow up? They had a detailed discussion about how they do outreach and surveys about whether or not, or how the services were received. So they did, in fact, have a robust follow-up and an outreach, and yet they were marked down for not having the referral process. So, and I know this has taken a long time, and I do appreciate you being willing to listen and consider this, but I hope that my discussion and my presentation has made you aware that there were a number of issues in the evaluation. And fundamentally, I think that those issues come down to a couple of things. One, as I said, the 3 members of the evaluation team were not people with experience in running a clinic and dealing with mental health issues. And that's not the county's or the agency's fault. It's difficult to find that kind of experience. But what needs to be done when you have people that you're asking to evaluate a proposal and to say who is the appropriate vendor to award the contract to, and they don't have that background, they need to have those very clear evaluation criteria that tell them this is what you should consider, and this is how the lack of that or a stronger or weaker criteria should affect your judgment. When they don't, as they did not here, have that kind of guidance, what you see is what you see here, which is going beyond the criteria that were stated in the RFP, failing to apply certain criteria, applying other criteria, and in some cases applying criteria that were in no way explained or stated. And that is not permitted by the law. So I ask that you take a look specifically at the issues and what we've cited in here. And I think that when you do, you will come to the same conclusion, which is that this process, this evaluation process, did not, in fact, apply the criteria that were stated and on which the bidders bid. And that at the very least, the proposals need to be reevaluated and evaluated under the standards that were stated in the RFP before an intent to award should be made. Thank you, unless you have questions.
Any questions from the board?
No, I have you said that the Consumer Self-Help Center didn't do things about rent and so forth, and yet in the...
Oh, no, they did.
Well, you said it, they didn't, and in the paperwork you submitted, they did. So, I mean...
I gave rent as an example of one of the things that was required. That's not one of the ones that they missed. The ones that they missed, and if you'll give me a moment...
That's not what I heard you say.
I'm sorry, you didn't hear what I said. No, I was giving an example of what was required.
Right.
They did. What they did not do...
Because they gave their occupancy expense. I mean, it's not... I mean, I just use that because that's what I heard you say. If you didn't, I apologize. But so it gets down to what I understand your issues is you didn't think that the team, the evaluating team, which is good information for all of us who've been on teams, evaluation teams, were not experienced, and really they should have been, or at least one of the evaluators should have had mental health experience or clinic experience, and that the process did not apply the criteria for the RFP. Are those your two? You said that there were 3 issues, but I just had those 2. Am I missing something?
Well, there's obviously a number of issues, but I think that you're right. The overarching issue is that the criteria in the RFP were not applied in the scoring. Okay. Why that occurred, I believe, is in part because you had inexperienced people, and in part, kind of the other side of that coin is because they were not given specific enough standards in the evaluation forms to tie them to the requirements of the RFP and to tell them how things should be evaluated. For your reference, on page 18 of our protest, that's where we identified the budget issue. We say CSHC's budget omitted specific required line items for printing, postage/communications, food and beverages for consumers, and goods and materials that support social and education efforts. Those were the 4 specified categories that were required to be separately stated. Now, do I think that those items were in their budget? Probably. In fact, if I had to guess, I would guess that they combined the food and the goods and materials into a single line item. But the point is that the agency made a specific point of saying these had to be separate line items. I don't know why, but they did. And this bidder was not scored down for disregarding that instruction and instead combining them or perhaps spreading them among other line items.
I have a question there.
I'm just saying, because under the definition, I'm not sure whose page this is, the county's or theirs.
That's theirs.
It does list definitions, and so on I, program meals activities include food items, etc. Yes. And so then you go to the item and it lists that.
Yes, and that's where I'm saying that they apparently combined 2 separate line items, one for food and one for materials and supplies, because if you read their description, it says, includes food items to be prepared at program, art supplies, recreation supplies, and activities, including outings. So they have combined into one line item something that they were told had to be, 2 items that they were told had to be separately stated.
Well, that sounds very critical.
And again, it's not critical, but the point is...
It's the pattern is what you're referring to.
It's the pattern, and it's the fact...
For me, that's not a compelling argument, at all. I mean, that's just like you picked up something that was like this minuscule mistake, and you then expanded it into something that is really just not a problem at all to me. That might be, you have more compelling arguments than that. That's
oh, absolutely. I would agree with you.
But that is, it's like, I don't care.
Yeah, and I hear you. I agree with you. It is, as I said, though, an indication where you have errors in one bid that were overlooked, alleged errors in another bid that were weighted very substantially.
Also, I just have a question on the in-county 3%.
Yes.
So I haven't read the ordinance recently, but when I look at the business license here, it says Sacramento is the mailing address for your business. So I think you're stretching it to say this is a local business. So, I mean, 'cause obviously they're not from here. They're from Sacramento. So, I mean, I don't think that's, I think maybe it's technically true.
We have specific criteria that we apply. However, in this case, this is not a bid, this is an RFP. It's a request for proposal, which allows you to evaluate on things other than price, is really the main criteria that you're to evaluate on.
Okay, thanks.
However, the code section that we referred to is not limited only to an RFP. The code section, and this is addressed it's addressed on page 11. It's also addressed elsewhere. But it's Calaveras County Code Section 3.28.122.
But, yeah, I mean, it's not, I just think that that's a stretch on a local bid. I mean, the company...
CBS is local too then.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's a Sacramento-based organization. It's not a Calaveras County-based organization. So I don't think that should be part of the argument either.
Well, then perhaps the county code needs to be amended, but as the way it stands.
But as one who was part of the intent was to give preference to homegrown businesses. I mean, we could say you're a local business in Calaveras, you're a local business in Amador County, you're a local business in Sacramento, so CBS, so Save Mart. And that was not the intent when we established local business preference.
But a stretch.
That's all right. That's, I think, the essence, though, of what... Jennifer, what's your last name?
Dower.
Dower. What Ms. Dower is saying is that the process didn't seem to follow in relation to what the RFP is. If I want to make sure that we're clear on the issues versus every single line item that you're talking about.
That's correct.
And the experience level of the people who did the evaluation.
Yes, I think that's probably why there was the disconnect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
It says here under scope of work.
Yes.
So, and bear with me. The Wellness and Recovery Center will provide peer-led programming for adults 18 and older who are recovering from psychiatric disorders and are seeking activities that regularly support their individually developed wellness recovery action plans, as well as prepares them for and engages them in productive and meaningful self-help support and socialization activities. Services include peer-run self-help support, socialization, outreach, and community integration activities to residents with mental illness and their families. And says the center will be open 4 days a week, from Monday through Thursday, from 9 to 4 in San Andreas, California. Services under this scope of services will be provided to county residents with serious mental illness, and the center is required to follow the spirit and principles of the mental health recovery model, which assists persons with mental illness to develop hopefulness, independence, and capacity to participate in routine community activities in a culturally competent manner, right?
Yes. That was all part of the original RFP and the continuing one. If you're looking for what was added or copied, that was not it. And that's
that was the original RFP.
That's in both, yes.
That's in both?
Yes.
And that's what the scope of work is, right?
Well, that is the discussion of the scope of work. If you get into the specifics, so under support groups, for example, employment services, there were specifics that were added that were copied from the original bidder's proposal. So this is the original, the intended awardee's original proposal said, this is what we propose to do for employment services. These are the specifics of what we propose to provide.
And rather than the county saying to bidders, you tell us what you think it's important to provide, the agency said, wow, that's the standard. You provide what this specific bidder said they were going to provide. Those are the services that we're going to evaluate you on, rather than allowing the bidders to state. And so if there was something that the intended awardee didn't have a program put together on or was weak on, it wasn't included. If there was something that they have and use that specific language, it was included. So it's not saying, oh no, the bidders weren't capable or couldn't have met this. What it shows is that the people who were looking at the award, the people who were looking at this, identified someone and said, that's, we want something that's going to define our services, that's what you have said is in your wheelhouse.
Okay. So in the past,
Supervisor Edson, I just wanted to chime in here, because rather than having a dialogue back and forth of whether it's the quality of the proposals, all of the different proposals that were submitted, the process and everything else, we have a really lengthy protest that was submitted. It's 25 pages long. And rather than going item by item, protest by protest, responding to those in an oral sense of debating back and forth of whether it was done properly or not, I would recommend that because of the length and the extent of this protest, that rather than continue the dialogue, if there's additional protests that you would like to enter into the record, certainly. But as far as responding and what staff did or didn't do, the process, and what was included in the RFP, and responding to this protest, I would ask that we continue the matter to allow staff to actually provide a written response to the protest, and that would provide the board a full overall evaluation of both the protest and staff's response to the protest as far as what happened and what didn't happen, and their position. So there would be two separate positions rather than on a short, limited time, not being able to address it today, allowing staff the time to properly respond to it.
I do want to make one clarification, and I apologize, I don't recall what I said in the protest, but as I was speaking, I was talking about the lack of supervision by the intended awardee and the 4 hours per year. I may have misspoken and said 4 hours per month, but it is in fact an annual budget, so it would be maximum of 4 hours per year of supervision.
Okay. Okay, the question?
Question is, how did your clients find out that the center was going to close?
I don't know.
How did we were told on May 4th about...
No, your clients.
Our clients, how did they find out? Really don't know.
But because when I drove by the building, there was posters all over the window that said you were going to close.
So that the county was closing us because the contract was expiring and had chosen us for the...
So do you think that has an effect on your clients? At all?
Do I think what has an effect?
I'm asking. Do you think that has an effect on your clients?
I'm going to start with a disclosure. I'm an attorney, not a mental health professional. I think that if I had been going to a facility for a year and I showed up when I was used to coming to a group, for example, I was used to going to, and the doors were locked and there was nobody around and no indication, I think I would feel very lost and confused.
Okay, so
I do think that it is important that they be told that the program is ending. And in fact, the living room, as I understand it, is still open for some services. So I don't know what those communications are, but yes, I think it is important that there be a smooth transition. And frankly, ideally, I would say that the living room's contract should have been extended to allow them to continue providing services until this type of issue was wrapped up, to allow for that smooth transition. Unfortunately, with their contract expiring, that did put, I think, the county and the people being served by those services in a very awkward position, as well as my client.
So So my question is, before it was closed, before the contract was up, there were signs in the windows of that building about support this group. We had a number of people in here with yellow shirts on.
I don't doubt, because they were told, and this was the first RFP, so the second RFP was later towards the end, but on the first RFP, there was not, as I understand it, an intended awardee identified, but my client was told from various people in the community that the contract had been was going to another party. And when they tried to find out the information, they did eventually find out that information. And they were told it was going to another party. So do I think that it's wrong that my client said to the people they've been serving, what we're hearing is that we're going to have to close, and if you want to support us, you want to see us continue, that you should go speak to it? I don't think that's wrong to tell somebody that if they want a particular service to continue, that they ought to speak to it.
So these people were scared. A lot of them were scared when they came in here. And a lot of people that I spoke to in my neighborhood were scared to death because their services were going to be terminated.
Supervisor Edson, I want to just bring this back to the process before the board of considering the staff's report of what is being proposed of the contract or continuing for staff to respond to the protest.
I think we're going to get into a lot of he said, she said. So I think at this point, to protect the integrity of the proposal and of the rebuttals and the information that was shared today, I would ask that we refer this back to Mary Sawicki to work with County Council in regards to a response to these particular questions and concerns. And Mary or David, do you have a time frame as to is there a time frame in which we need to respond by? Is it 30 days or 2 weeks or anything along those lines that you can share with us?
This probably should go to outside counsel because there's only 3 of us. And if I was to do this response, this would probably be a 3-week job. That's every hour of my time. So we're looking at least a month to get a formal legal response back to this very voluminous and very detailed protest. That's my recommendation.
Okay. So I'm going to refer this back to County Council and Mary Sawicki's office to come up with a proposal back to the board on how best to handle this. Whether it needs outside counsel, it can be handled inside. Supervisor Spellman?
I have one question. I need to make this brief because I don't have a lot of patience for my colleagues, so as you may have noticed. Ms. Dollar, I'm going to be attempting to do you a favor here. I'm going to ask you a very direct question. I'm going to ask you for a direct answer.
Okay.
Are you asking for a new and third RFP in which your client can submit their qualifications, or are you asking that this county reevaluate the proposals that were submitted under RFP number 2 and be judged fairly, in your opinion?
I am asking, I believe in looking at this that at least the proposals do need to be reevaluated under the standards in the RFP, and I think my client would be satisfied with that. The county certainly could go out for a third RFP, but we're not asking for that.
So you're asking for consideration based on the information given to people who were participating in the RFP, in this case, RFP number 2, in which you feel that your client may have been slighted and that perhaps those things should be looked at and reevaluated again under the stated criteria of RFP number 2.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that concise?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I got a question
Yes.
here.
Supervisor Ray.
What if we just did that? What you just said there, what if we just reevaluated it instead of going through and spending X thousands of dollars on rebutting each point?
Well, again, I do like, go
I'm
ahead.
asking Megan here.
Go ahead.
Mostly, sorry.
Certainly, the board could direct staff to reevaluate the proposals. We very well may end up in the exact same place that would require staff to then respond to another protest. Certainly, that is something that is an option that the board could direct staff to do. But again, we may be back here in the same position after that reevaluation. Just putting that out there.
You don't think that given the circumstances and...
Quite honestly, I don't know, because I was not involved in the process, and I have not had an opportunity to review the entire 25 pages, 26 pages. So other than listening to the oral arguments, and I don't know all of exactly what did or didn't happen, going through and
So you're saying that
in order to respond, you have to
go through here and examine each protest point by point before we could then make a determination, or even if we did want to do it, then we know what we need to fix in the RFP process if we did need to fix that.
Well, there may not be a problem with what the process that did go through. There may have been, everything may have been followed as far as the criteria on a even playing field, but until staff has an opportunity to look at it and evaluate exactly what happened to what the objection is, I can't.
Okay. And then as far as hiring outside counsel, would that funding source come from, where would that funding come from?
Probably from Health and Human Services agencies.
From Health and Human Services agencies? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Mary.
And what kind of hours are we talking about, or cost?
I don't...
It could range. I know Mr. Sirius did indicate that it could take up to 40 to 80 hours time, because that person would have to go in and do a complete review of the process, of all of the documentation, of all of potentially do interviews of staff to figure out what happened. So there would be
An outside counsel is a couple $100 an hour at least.
At least.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to refer this item back to Mary and County Council, and we'll hear back on this item in the future.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we have item number 13 on the budget, administration, adopting a resolution making a finding of substantial public benefit and waiving certain fees for Habitat for Humanity of Calaveras. And Lori?
Yes, and I'll make this very quick. Historically, the board has adopted fee waivers for Habitat for Humanities under a finding of public benefits. Habitat for Humanity helps to provide affordable housing units in Calaveras County, and as such, the board has adopted previous resolutions. 06201 was adopted by the board in 2006 and waived certain community development agency fees at that point in time. Resolution 08084 similarly waived environmental management agency fees. Both of these resolutions, prior resolutions, sunsetted in 2009. Actually, some of the departments, not recognizing that they had sunsetted, had been waiving the fees even between 2009 and today, that we want to bring back to the board a new resolution that would indeed extend for a period of September 9th through June 30th, 2017, the ability to waive fees in both the planning department, the building department, and the environmental management department, and with specific review, potentially other fees. There are a number of fees in public works that may or may not be able to be waived depending on the specific project and exemptions identified in the ordinances that implemented those fees. So this is really a continuation of existing policy that's unstudied previously. As I understand it, Habitat has 3 projects planned for 2014. 2 projects planned for 2014, thank you. And so waiving these fees will help them to actually proceed with the development of those affordable housing units.
Thank you, Lori. Are there any board questions on this item? Any public comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Edson, second by Supervisor Wright, to adopt a resolution making a finding of substantial public benefit and waiving certain fees for Habitat for Humanity Calaveras. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 14 from the Auditor's Office, adopting a resolution establishing ad valorem property tax rates for fiscal year 2014-15. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning. So this is just, we do this every single year. My office has to come forward and have the Board of Supervisors adopt the property tax rates that will be calculated and placed on the bills. The debt service, all of the debt service ones that are included in the staff report as well as the resolution, those are everything from our general obligation bond for the jail to CUSD bonds to Delta College, Yosemite College, Mark Twain, Bret Harte. We are in charge of putting those rates, calculating out what those bond rates, collection debt service rates are going to be for the tax bill, calculating that out, and then getting the collections of those monies through the tax collector.
How are those percentages reached?
So we look at what the amortization schedule is for the debt payment, and whatever that debt payment is in comparison to the assessed valuations within those taxing jurisdictions, we have to back into what that debt service needs to be. So what we found was as assessed values declined, the actual rate per 100,000 was actually increasing. As assessed values go up, then the bond rates go down because we just have to back into whatever we need to collect in order to make that debt service.
Well, we'd like our assessed values to go up.
Yes, we all would.
And our bond rates to go down.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? Supervisor Spellman?
I have a very grave concern about this item in regards to the money that we facilitate collection and disbursement for Calaveras Unified School District. In the California State Education Code, Section 15278, 15280, and 15282, there are a number of conditions that are mandatory to be compliant with state education code, and that education code also refers to a need for compliance to California constitutional provision, Article 13, Section 1, Subdivision B, Paragraph 3. To sum up, there's a number of things, and I've kind of pared it down for the sake of time. But the Citizens Oversight Committee is something that's required by law. They are to ensure that bond revenues are expended only for the purposes described in paragraph 3, subdivision B of section 1, article 13A of the Constitution, State of California. 15280B says a report shall be issued at least once a year. This committee has not met since January of 2011. So it's obvious that that requirement is in default. Section 15282A, the Citizens Oversight Committee shall consist of at least 7 members. The committee has never had 7 members since its inception. The maximum members it's ever had by public record, which you can find on the district's website is 5, and the state law requires 7. So those are just a couple brief glaring points, but I can give you the links to the pages of the Constitution and the Ed Code to get further light and knowledge if you choose to. I've just tried again to pare it down. Under the California State Constitution, it says under Article 13, Section 1, Subdivision B, Paragraph 3B, a list of the specific school facilities projects to be funded as part of that. And then there's a requirement that the funds have been expended only on the specific projects listed. They don't have a specific project list. They never have. And they have used funds for other things that were never included on the ballot measure in which people voted on. Not the least of which is about $1.8 million for a turf football field at the middle school. Under D, Section D, a requirement that there's an annual independent financial audit, which has never happened. Following that, if these requirements aren't met, in Section 1 there's a severability clause that says if any of the provisions of this measure shall be found to be unconstitutional or otherwise invalid, provisions of this measure are deemed to be severable. Now, having said that, I think it's fairly clear that we have a big problem on our hands with the school district. They have not met the requirements under the law, both by the California State Education Code and the California State Constitution. And as a board, if we vote today to allow these taxes for these bonds to be collected and then subsequently dispersed to the school district,
That's not what this is for.
knowing that they're in violation, I would need some legal opinion on this, and I definitely will not vote in favor of this today. I would hope that we could bring this back at our next meeting so that we can have a full legal disclosure, because I will not put this county in jeopardy of being party to any illegal operations.
This is to pay on monies that have already been issued. So these bonds were issued outside of this process. And so there's two, there's basically two parts to a bond. There's the sale of the bond and the receipt of those bond proceeds and how those bond proceeds are then spent. And that's where the Oversight Committee comes in. That's where a budget needs to be in play. And that's where it's very clearly articulated on how those dollars can be spent. It was the same thing with our general obligation bond. We didn't have an Oversight Committee requirement, but there were requirements on how those dollars could be spent. That's not what this covers. What this covers is for the bonds that have already been issued and the proceeds that have already been dispersed, we have a bill that we have to pay to those that purchased the bonds. And that's what this debt service is. In terms of severability, there's really two. You either collect the money from the taxpayers that live within these jurisdictions of where these bond dollars were supposed to be spent, or if it was deemed by an oversight committee, which if that wasn't happening, I guess you could probably reach out to the grand jury and have a grand jury report written. You could go that route, and if it was deemed that those dollars were not spent according to the original documents of why those bonds were issued, and those dollars were not spent in accordance with that, then it is the liability falls on the issuer, which would be the school district. So if they had $10 million in bond proceeds that they spent, and they spent outside of the rules surrounding those, they would have to pay that $10 million back to the bond holders. So it's either the taxpayers need to pay for the $10 million of bonds that were issued, or the entity that spent the money has to pay it back. But this is to pay for the bonds that were already issued, whether they're completely spent or partially spent or sitting there waiting to be spent. This is to pay the bond holders the debt service, because we have bills that are going to need to be paid, so we have to collect this money for that. I totally get what you're saying, and we saw a similar issue with Delta College, and there was an oversight committee. There still is an oversight committee. I think in 2010, I can't remember the year, they did find in a review of the oversight committee, I don't know if it was the grand jury that got involved, that some of the state controller, that some of the bond proceeds were actually spent on administrative expenditures. That is an absolute no-no. And so that Delta College was on the hook for that. So, and they pay it back. And so that's what happens. But there's a course to that. But this has nothing to do with collection and then disbursement. This money does not go to CUSD. This money goes to the bondholder.
Well, I think for the sake of myself and others to be prudent in our duties as elected officials, we need to make sure that there is absolutely no liability. I mean, I'm willing to I believe that I hear you hearing that we don't, in your opinion. But I'd like a legal opinion from our legal department that perhaps could come back to us at our next meeting, because for us we have to approve this every year on an annual basis.
As well as Yosemite and Delta. So we have our county has as much liability on this as we did with Delta College misappropriating bond proceeds on administrative costs. It's zero. But we are required to have this on our tax bills based on secured property within these taxing jurisdictions, and we have a timeline in order to get this information done. So this has to be passed.
I would also say that the collecting agency for Yosemite College District and Delta College District is respectfully Stanislaus County and San Joaquin County. We collect for this school district.
Yes.
And that puts us in a different realm for liability.
We also collect for Yosemite and Delta.
What's that?
We collect for Yosemite and Delta for the taxpayers that live in our county, and then we send that money to San Joaquin and
administered
Delta.
by Stanislaus and San Joaquin County. That's what it says. It says they're administered. We collect, it's administered.
Because their district is in multiple counties.
Correct. Stanislaus County is the administrating body.
We collect the taxes here.
We collect it, they administer it. We do both, though, for this school district.
No, we collect for the school district.
I'm saying I would like to get legal counsel to come back to us by our next meeting on the 23rd, and I would like some clarity on this, because I believe that knowing that these legal requirements have gone afoul, that we may be in jeopardy of some liability.
Megan, do you want to comment on that, or?
If it is the desire of the entire board for a formal written response from our office as to Supervisor Spellman's concerns, certainly we can do that if that is the wish of the entire board. However, I do concur with what Rebecca Cowan has been saying as far as the process of what this item is, and I do not see that there is a liability tied to the county for collecting on the bond that has already been approved.
Knowing that they're not obeying the law.
That's a different path. So the other path is that, there needs to be pressure on the oversight committee to meet. Now, whether that comes from the board or the grand jury or you or the state controller's office, I'm not sure what the best avenue for that is, but it's an entirely different conversation and it's an entirely different outcome. And the reality is, regardless, even if they said 3/4 of the bond proceeds were spent in accordance with their original intent, the taxpayer is still going to be on the hook for 3/4 of those dollars, and then the district is going to be on the hook for the other quarter. So however that plays out, but we are responsible as the county that issues the tax bills and collects on those taxes. That's what this is for.
And also just to point out that there would have to be a full investigation as far as to what extent, if they are in any kind of breach, or if they aren't following the requirements that they are, to what extent, and if they are. That is something that would not be within our purview to do that investigation to determine.
Are we obligated under any law that requires us to collect and disperse or to collect those things? I mean, could
Yes, we are.
regardless of legal improprieties that may exist?
Revenue and taxation code requires us to do this. This is the same thing as the next item that's going to come back, where it says the auditor shall, the tax collector shall. We don't get to volunteer for it or voluntarily not do it. It is a requirement of our county to do this.
Rebecca, I have a question. On unitary debt service, can you give me a brief explanation as to what that is?
It's just all of it. It's all of the debt service down below, all added together. So it's a lot. When people look at their tax bill, especially if they have multiple bonds going on, or if someone is asking, what is the total beyond the 1%? What really is it? It's about 1.5%.
And then isn't the jail, that is the,
what is it? It's the Calaveras County General Obligation Bonds 2007.
Okay, all right. All right, any further comments or questions from the board? Any public comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion one way or the other.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion made by Supervisor Edson, second by Supervisor Wright, to adopt a resolution establishing an ad valorem property tax rates for fiscal year 2014-15. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1, with Supervisor Spellman opposing.
We may have a requirement to collect those, but that doesn't mean that I have to voluntarily participate with my vote for somebody that's conducting illegal activities.
Okay, item number 15, auditor, adopting a resolution authorizing the auditor controller and the treasurer tax to collect a special assessment for the Calaveras County Water District's Fly-In Acres Assessment District and deduct an administrative fee of up to $8 per installment.
Yes. So this is pretty standard. So it's various districts will come to us with their special assessment information and want to apply it on our tax bills. We'll also get I think last year you saw where I brought forward unpaid bills or assessments from water districts or sanitary districts. Those are the types of things that come to the county, and we are required to put them on our tax bills. We're required to put them in our tax system, and we're required to collect on them. As part of that collection effort, we are allowed an administrative charge that it partially covers some of that activity in the treasurer in my office.
So in your comment about alternatives, if we didn't approve this, then...
Yeah, so with that said, the district would have to agree to do that. If the district said no, then if you read the code, it says shall, the auditor shall do this.
So it reverts back to us.
So if they said, in some cases, the district will say, all right, we'll try to work with them and we'll try to collect it ourselves. But a lot of times they've kind of already gone through that route, and so they want it on the secured property, and they want it on their tax bill.
Okay.
So they could voluntarily agree to take it off of us or not, and if they don't, then we're required to accept it.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this item?
It's on here.
Supervisor
Ms. Callen, so we get the administrative costs for managing it. Then if it goes into teeter, we get the teeter also, correct? We get that.
The penalties and interest, yeah.
Right. So the penalties will go into teeter plus the administrative cost.
No, the administrative cost is actually a current revenue to my office and the treasurer's office.
But the administrative cost is for the number of bills that are sent.
It's for my office having to put it into the property tax system, and it's also for the tax collector to put it on the bill.
But that's an every year cost.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, Supervisor Spelman?
The only question I had on this was, I was concerned as to whether or not an $8 fee per installment would be sufficient for cost recovery.
It's not, but that is the maximum that we're allowed to charge per code.
And I already figured that out, knowing who we're speaking.
So, if I could get more, I would, but I can't.
That's what I mean.
Hey, people need to pay for the services they're asking for. I mean, we're not running a charity.
Any other questions from board? Any public comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
I'll move this item.
Second.
I have a motion made by Supervisor Callaway, second by Supervisor Edson, to adopt a resolution authorizing the auditor controller and the treasurer tax collector to collect a special assessment for the Calaveras County Water District's fly-in acres assessment districts and deduct an administrative fee up to $8 per installment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, as made mention when we started our meeting today, we're going to take our lunch recess to attend the senior luncheon here in town. Then we'll come back. I believe we allocated ourselves an hour and a half. We'll be back here 2 o'clock. 2 hours for the luncheon?
Well, the next thing on the
I would defer to CAO.
Okay. So we'll return at the 2 o'clock hour, at which time we will take up items number 16 and 17. Then we'll move to 18, 19 on through. Go ahead.
So, excuse me, but we did tell the special districts that we would be probably coming back about 1:30 to hear the 2 special district items. I apologize, I was not paying attention.
All right, I will correct myself. We will be back here at 1:30 to address items number 16 and 17, and then move into the final budget hearings with an estimated time frame of 2 o'clock. So at this point, we'll take a recess. Thank you.